right, so we are at Pro Gym Montreal, and I have a guy with me. I call him a celebrity trainer. I can actually call him the secret weapon of performance sports. 20 plus years of industry training in science and biomechanics, human movement, corrective science. The list goes really on with this guy. He's worked with multiple NHL teams over the years, now the Penguins right now, I believe. Some of the best athletes in the world work with Andy O'Brien, from the Crosbys to tennis stars, you name it, and they go to this guy to become the best in the world at what they do. Now I'm with this guy at the biggest gym in the world with the best trainer, well, I guess in my eyes, in corrective in the world, Andy O'Brien. It's great to have you,
Matt. Hey, nice being here. I always say he'd be a really good agent for me. Does a pretty amazing promotion, but I consider myself lucky to have just been a fly on the wall, been around some cool people, seen some cool things, and just here to share.
Well, it's great to have Andy. Actually, I asked Andy to, when he come back to Montreal, to book his, open up his calendar, because we're going to go through some training. We're going to go through some warm-up stuff that Andy really hasn't shared, or you guys probably haven't seen very much of in the industry, if ever. Because I'll tell you where it came from. When he was back in Montreal last month, we did one workout of back on these T-bar rows, and for like 20 minutes, Andy was giving me all this stuff on my back that I've never seen. And I was like, Andy, I'm training stuff now. So he's letting all the things loose. We're going to go through his box in his mind of new training information, so we're going to buckle up with that.
Yeah, sounds great. The part that I have always loved the most is the movement efficiency side of it, right? Understanding how to tweak the movement a little bit to maybe create a different effect. So can't wait to dive in.
Let's do it, Andy. So the first part we're going to do warm-up, I believe, warm-up process, right?
Yeah, sounds great. So the warm-up just basically breaking down into different themes. So many ways you can hit it, so many different types of dynamic movement. I don't think there's one warm-up that's better than another, but I think we're just going to go through some content and just talk a little bit about it as we go.
Of course. Yeah. Even like one thing I asked Andy is, obviously this is going to work towards bodybuilders, powerlifters, super league athletes, CrossFit athletes. Typically warm-up usually isn't always practiced, in our industry. It's always just go in the gym and lift or perform.
Yep.
But Andy gave me this warm-up that you guys are going to get today, and a lot of information that's just wow. So buckle up. It's going to be exciting.
All right, sweet. Yeah. That's great. So the second thing I wanted to get into, we started with that static position.
Correct.
Static position with muscle energy components. The muscle is contracting. There's a little bit of an active stretch component to it. The next one we're going to do is a little bit more of a standing position, or a little more ground-based. So essentially you're just going to drop down into a split, and then you're going to do that same thing where you're going to set the hip, right? So again, we're trying to get out of this position where we create an anterior pelvic tilt. You want to try to go into a posterior pelvic tilt, okay, which is going to maximize the stretch directly over the hip flexor. The hip is over the knee, the shoulders are over the hip, okay? And then you're just going to control the rip point. So your head comes back, your shoulders come back, but you maintain this posterior pelvic tilt. There you go. And so what we're trying to do from that position is we're just basically going to take our hands and go behind the head this way. Or you can go directly above the head, whatever's easiest. So if you feel like you can control this, I think that's great. And then what you're going to do is you're just going to come up, pause, rotate, hold position, and then come right back down. You're going to do some repetitions from here. So again, squeeze the glute, lift, rotate, and then come back down. And the whole goal is to just create some activation here. Up, control, rotate, and then come back. So we're trying to create stabilization here and here. So you rotate through the spine as you come up. Go ahead, Matt, do one more. Just maintain a little contact with my knee and rotate through the spine. There you go, and then come back. Let's switch to the other side and do some reps from there. It's incredible. So the whole goal between putting your hands behind your head is to create more length on this anterior side of the hip. But you don't want that to cause too much arching of the back. Okay? You want to try to control this. So the hands come behind the head, a little bit of a chin tuck, but we just kind of control this. Yeah, perfect. And that's why we stay over the hip instead of in front of it. It makes it a lot easier. So go ahead and lift. Pause, rotate towards me, and then come back. Good, back down.
This side's almost more, not as strong.
Yeah.
Interesting.
A little bit less stable. Up, pause, rotate. Yeah, very good. Doing a good job of not trying to overly maximize the rotation. Up, pause. Good. Remember to breathe. So you want good activation here, but breathe and relax into the stretch. And relax. Okay, good. So there's a lot of different ways to do that. I think I recommend coming up a little higher potentially, but really all we're trying to do is get into a position where that muscle's contracting in the position that you want it to contract. So you're basically creating that neutral spine pelvic position. You come up, you've got a little contraction now on that anterior side of the hip because you're pushing down into the ground. And then from here, we're creating a little rotation. Okay, so that fascia is going to come up and attach in this kind of rotational way. And we want to try to, lengthen the fascia through that. So what you're going to get from that is now, not only is the muscle and the fascia lengthened, we have activation of the glute, activation of your core, and T-spine mobility. So that's a T-spine mobilization exercise, core activation, glute activation, hip lengthening type of drill. In one, all kinds of different things. I think anything single leg, like you're going to do any kind of like sled push, any kind of lunging, any kind of drill where you have to fully extend that hip in a single leg stance, really good. Any kind of core work where you're going to rotate, and then anything you just want good posture. So all your pulls, all your pressing, any kind of standing exercise where you want to have good postural control, I think that would really help with.
So basically, just to kind of recap, is when we're down here, Andy, it's going to get that muscle activation like you talked about. Putting more layman terms, by the way.
Sure. Yeah, sure.
And then we're basically going to almost get that other muscles to contract to activate.
Yeah, sure.
And then you're opening up that oblique and body and so forth.
You got it. You got it. There's quite a bit of lengthening that's going on through that naturally. But I think the big thing is you asked a question earlier about muscle activation. And the fascinating thing about muscle activation is you're getting, just by contracting the muscle, you don't necessarily activate it. Okay? Most of the time you need some kind of load or you need some kind of demand on the muscle to potentiate it, right? So I'm not a big believer in using just a body weight movement to activate a muscle, but when you're contracting the muscle at the end of its range, where it's extremely weak in its lengthened position, it can become a very effective muscle activation strategy. And you're also training a sequence of a movement, you're training a position. So posturally, you're creating global activation around a specific type of position, so that when you go into that position later, you're going to be able to have more neuromuscular control. So the whole idea is, you're trying to basically create a position that's taking you into the end of your range of motion, producing a little bit of contraction around that, and then emphasizing the biomechanical principles or the postural principles that you need to make that position happen. And so that's really what this is about. So we're looking at anterior hip. We did one on the ground. We did one a little bit more kneeling, and then later when we get into our dynamic series, we'll have some hits on the hip, on that anterior side as well.
I'm jumping forward, Andy, but I want to ask this question. So if the guy's has a lower back problem when he squats. Obviously, this is all going to go to the lower bisection when we go to that. But what I like about this movement here is I almost feel like now when I squat, because I have a lower back issue or something like that, it's like I got my glutes to contract. I'm now letting this relax, the psoas muscle and the hip flexor muscle. And then obviously contracting the core, correct? Is that right?
Yeah, for sure. Like I think what you're going to find is this is probably, when you're in your squat, like most of the control that you have to have, there's not a lot of demands in hip flexor length necessarily in the squat, because you're going into this flex position, right? Where you might get it is a little bit of control at the top. And same thing in the deadlift. In a squat and a deadlift, when you get to the top, if you're a little bit restricted through the hip, you may not get a good extension of your hip, so you may not be really good at the finish. And so in the finish of a deadlift, for example, we want to come up, not only do you want to push through, engage your glutes and finish this movement, right? But you want to finish it with a really good neutral spine position. Typically what happens is people get to this position and now they're tight through the hips, they're restricted there, and then they have very poor postural control. So a lot of times the finish will come from the back, right? So you're going to get extension of the lumbar spine, and you're going to pull with the upper body to get that finish. But what you really want to try to do is push through the hip, maintain a neutral spine, and fully extend through the hip, and you get really good glute development that way. And you're going to get really good postural development. So it's going to do all kinds of great things for your T-spine, your head position. But I think the common theme for people that have this upper cross syndrome or that kind of like extended rib cage and the tight T-spine is a lot of times they fail when it comes to hip extension. So when they go to extend their hip, they actually extend their back. And they get a little overdeveloped in their trap. They get a little bit underdeveloped in their core. So whether you're lifting to be good at a sport or whether you're doing something dynamic, whether it's CrossFit, whether it's competition, just being able to engage and maintain a really good core control and really good postural control through hip extension is a really, really good thing to have on any kind of lifts, no matter what you're doing.
That's huge. I love that. So now that's basically kind of more the hip stuff. And those two things right there are game changers. I'm going to use those from now on.
That's awesome. You got it, man.
Because I've been doing this one-legged stuff, Andy, for years. But I haven't been doing it correctly. Like that first time I'm like, rib cage. So I don't want to go here and keep doing it, but I'm just expressing to the viewers here everything like, holy smokes. Big game changers there.
Totally. And even though it's a static position, it is an active stretch. Right? So we're not just statically pulling the position, pulling the muscle. We're actually trying to create some length of muscle, then contract it. And what you should feel when you do this stretch, like first of all, that when you come off the stretch, you should feel an instant difference. So you should have some kind of activation, you have some kind of control. You're going to be able to move a little bit more freely and a little bit more control. But you should actually feel a little bit of a shake. That to me is an indication that there's a reflexogenic or a dynamic proprioceptive response of the muscle taking place. And that's where the potentiation comes from. There's so many, I think, muscle activation strategies out there that look at activation as the same thing as contraction. Just contracting a muscle, to me, doesn't activate it or potentiate it. You have to activate it with some demand or with some load. So that's either got to be with some weight, or it's got to be with some level of endurance, or just take it until it's in its biomechanically weakest position and contract it. And then you're going to see this. And when you see that, you know you're trying to overcome some demand of you're offering some demand of the muscle that's ill prepared for, and it should respond. And then you should get this improvement, within 20% of the muscle capabilities. That's ultimately what activation is for, so that when you go to move, you're like, okay, that's turned on, I'm moving well, and that's what you should feel from those two drills. Now we're going to work the lateral side of the thigh and the groin a little bit. I typically find there's a lot of value in working both in the warm-up, especially that lateral side, and I think some of the static stretches are really good for that lateral side. So this is a pigeon pose or pigeon stretch. Traditionally, the stretch is done this way, okay? And so that leg is aligned with this knee, and then you have a really closed position of the knee here. What I actually find is I'm not a big fan of aligning this with the same size shoulder. I think that works a little more IT band. To me, most people need a little bit more work on their glute min or their glute med. I think there's a lot of restriction, especially we see this a lot with hockey players. Ectomorphic athletes, very tall, skinny, non-muscular athletes, very traditionally present this way. This is like called a knee valgus type of a thing. It's a little bit of a pronation. And so the natural thing is people in rehab will try to encourage people to work the lateral side of their hips. So they're doing a lot of clamshells. You see people doing mini band walks. I actually see a lot more of this, right? So I see this in more muscular athletes, more muscularly developed athletes, bodybuilders, a lot of hockey players. Because we do so much work pushing off laterally with the hip, we typically see this. So to me, it kind of makes no sense to really potentiate or activate that lateral part of the hip. I think you want to activate the medial side a little bit more to create some balance there. And I think you got to do a lot of stretching, a lot of mobility of the lateral side of the hip. So, so the stretch that I modify, this modified pigeon stretch, is designed to take the stretch out of the IT band and put it in the high part of the hip. And so essentially what I do is, instead of aligning the knee with this shoulder, I align it with the opposite shoulder. So I'm going to go from a push-up position, I'm going to come across, and then I'm going to keep 90 degrees here. Okay. So this is 90 degrees. Now what I want to do is take my body and turn it, and I'm going to drop this elbow directly in front, or I can use my hand. Okay, but I want this shoulder aligned with this knee, and I'm going to stay up on the back leg. Yeah, I'm contracting that left side glute, and so I'm staying up. So instead of dropping down where it's more static, I believe if I get into this position and I actively roll, and then I just get into that posterior pelvic tilt. So I'm just tilting and engaging my glute. So I've got a little activation there. Yeah, you got it. So you got it. So let's start over, Matt. I'll show you. Probably the start's the most critical thing. Yeah. I want you to kick high. Kick high? Okay. So kick high.
I'm very flexible.
There you go. Now hold that position. Now stay up. So stay up on that leg. Good. Now you got it. So this is your position essentially at the end of the day. And then just turn over. Yeah, here? You got it. That's your spot. So by maintaining 90 degrees here and aligning this over the other side, we're just moving the stretch off the IT band. We're moving it a little more proximally in the hip. So you're getting that high outside part of the hip. It's
incredible.
And for any drills where you need to cross over, in hockey we actually cross over a lot. A lot of people aren't aware of this, but actually that crossover stride is maybe the most critical type of acceleration pattern.
If I move my hand higher,
yeah, absolutely. You can reach out from that side. That'll help with the hip on this side. Yeah, there's no question. And then you can actually drop onto your forearm on that side. Tons of modified positions that you can do. Yeah, you got it. Reach on that side.
I'm not that flexible.
So there's a lot of different ways that you can accommodate this, but the whole idea is just to change the position of the knee relative to the hip. You want to try the other side?
Yeah, let's do it. Wow, that's incredible. Okay.
So same thing, you can drive that up and high. Yeah, there you go.
Here?
Yeah, so this is really basic. There's a lot of different types. I'm a really big fan of Kelly Starrett's hip distraction series. I think it's a brilliant series. It does a lot of stuff to create mobility in the hip. I think that's a whole other series where we're dealing with a lot of like heavy max lifting where you've got a lot of joint pathology that you have to work from. So these are just really basic. You can do this with your body weight. You don't need a lot of bands or any kind of assistance exercises, but it's just a little bit of a change in the position. Now if you want, you can drop on this forearm.
I can drop here?
Yeah. And that'll actually increase the intensity on the left side. And you can, I would stay up on that side, yeah. And then just extend the back leg. Yeah, there you go.
Love this.
Yeah, you got it.
I never felt this pull, but it's great.
All right, and relax. Good.
It's like really in that hip, eh?
It's higher. Yeah, it's just a little bit of a higher position. And so that most of the themes of what I'm doing, at least with the people that I see and their needs, we're doing a lot more work to work that part of the hip and a lot less on the lower rotators of the hip, a lot higher on the abductors of the hip. So a lot more on the glute med and glute
What's
mid.
optimal for duration to hold that for maximal benefit?
You know, I would say for that one, I'd stay in that 15-second range.
Okay.
Yeah, so that would be what I would say for that one. I think it's pretty basic. And then you'll see that it's part of a progression here.
Of course.
And again, if you're doing it more for stretching, it might go a little longer, but for warm-up and activation at 15 seconds is fine.
So that kind of stretch, Andy, would that work great going in? I'm going to go back to the basics again.
Sure,
Sorry, but
yeah.
go back to the squatting and the deadlifting movements or lunges.
Yeah.
That's probably going to greatly enhance that, right?
I think what it's going to do, the relationship of the muscles works like this, outside, inside.
Okay.
So the muscle that we just stretched is going to help these muscles contract.
Okay.
So if you have any issues where you have a difficult time with your adductors being involved in movement, it's going to really help you in that way.
Okay.
So for a lot of people, when they go to squat, they might go a little bit wide here.
Yeah.
So it can help you stay on the mid part of your foot and get a little bit more medial activation. So it can be a lot better. Again, if you're doing any kind of dynamic movement, like so you're going to cross your feet. If you're a tennis player or a hockey player where you have to move this way, or you're a soccer player, you have to do anything where you're going that way, it's going to greatly take off some of the tension on this side and alleviate a little bit of the stress in the groin to pull through that movement. So that's really the benefit of it. In terms of lifting, any drill where you're doing any kind of single leg drill or anything that might have a little bit of enhanced recruitment of the adductor, you're going to have a little bit less stress on that adductor because now you've just lengthened that limb, the limb on the posterior side.
So is there benefit, like I do this all the time too, like I'm a culprit to this, doing my medial glute activation before going into squats.
Yeah.
Is it actually beneficial or not, Andy? Like, what do you think?
So if you're the type of person where the line between your toe and your knee is this way, you probably do want to do some lateral rotation. But if you're the kind of person that actually goes this way in a squat where everything's like very far outside, I think you could greatly benefit from some mobility work or some flexibility to try and enhance. Because that, to me, I always believe that in any kind of motion you have, this has to go directly over the toe.
Right.
Regardless of where your stance is. You should have a really good line between your knee and your toe if you want to avoid any kind of like medial or lateral stress on the knee. So actually, like you want to, if you have somebody who's like this when they're squatting, it may actually assist you to create a little bit more mobility to get directly over your toe. Now, if you have some kind of like hip pathology and the reason why you're flaring out is to protect that, that's a little bit of a different story. You've got like a hip labrum tear or something, but I think generally speaking, when you have a muscle imbalance, so two muscles that have an antagonistic relationship, like tricep, bicep, quadricep, hamstring, lateral part of the hip, medial adductor, those restoring those muscle imbalances and improving the relationships between the two are going to enhance your overall athleticism. Okay. So if you're an athlete who's training in the gym who's not just one-dimensional in the way that you want to do things, overcoming those muscle imbalances as a general rule is a great concept, and it's a really good application for your warm-up. Okay. So my warm-up, I want to take where I'm weak, I want to activate those muscles, I want to take where I'm tight, and I want to lengthen those muscles, and now I've just got good multi-directional movement capabilities in my body.
Right.
So that's really what you want to try to do from a warm-up standpoint. So this is just covering off a lot of different areas, and how you would tweak it for yourself would vary from person to person.
No problem.
Yeah. So this is just a sumo squat position that I like. I'm actually not a huge fan of this position. I think it can be good for some people. It's just hard to make an active stretch from that position. So what I like is actually just this. Some people call it a third world sit or a sumo sit. But it's basically just dropping down. You're going to use your hands like this, and you're going to drop down into this position. Now what we're going to try to do is create some extension in our spine. So from this position, you're just going to lift through the spine, and you can go behind the head, okay, or you can lift this way. Okay, so one of the two, you're either going to lift up that way, set your head position and tuck, and then you're just going to come up about halfway and pause, and then come back down, and you're going to work that bottom range of the hip. So you're essentially working that sort of groove with lateral rotation of the hip and a deep squat position, but our whole goal is really working the back. So can you maintain a neutral spine in that deep squat position? And what you're going to get is just a lot of adductor. You've lengthened the adductor, And then after you've lengthened it, you're contracting it. Simple as that, and maintaining a neutral spine.
With your feet, are you pushing from the balls or the heels, or just balanced?
It's a good question. So I think that's a mid-foot type of a thing. So you definitely don't want to be in the toes, and that's a common mistake. So one of the mistakes you'll see for somebody that doesn't have that range is they'll go like this, right? And that's not gonna really help you. You're better off just squatting to here, if that's what you can squat from. But the key thing is what's going on at your knees, right? So you're not coming down to this position. You want to get that external rotation of the hip, because you do want to have like some length.
Yeah.
You know, if it's a true sumo, you can go a little bit wider. But the whole idea is from this position is, can I maintain a neutral spine? Okay. And if I can maintain that, go as low as I can without breaking at the spine. And then I'm just going to create a little bit of muscle contraction around it.
So you start from here, right?
Yeah, perfect. Okay, so like hold it right there. Put the hands behind your head. So essentially what we've done is you want to make sure that the toe matches here. Okay. So you're going to drive out a little bit more. Now lift up with your body position a little bit. Yeah, right there. Good. Keep driving out. So we're creating, can you feel a stretch in here in your groin? Do you feel this in your hip? Or do you feel, okay, perfect. So keep driving out. Drive the toes in a little bit for me. So you're just going to slide them in a little bit, change your stance a little bit. Yeah, perfect, good. Now drive the knees out a little more, good. Now we have a nice like neutral line all the way down the kinetic chain. And now just put hands behind the head for me, Matt. So weave your fingers together.
Like this?
Yes, just like that. Yeah, just hold that. And so it's going to be that position. Now drop down a little bit and then up. And just pulse from there. Good. Good. Head up. Good. A little more control from here. Good. So just important to maintain a neutral spine and just work that position and relax. Good.
That's incredible.
It's good. Yeah, so really the key thing was you took your toe position a little wider than what your hips are capable of. So once you got down, you were just in a little bit. That's just putting a little bit of medial stress on the knee. So what I would say is I'd say just take the toe in a little bit and make sure that the hip really, the external rotation of the hip really matches that side of it. And you know, you can start this way.
Yeah.
You know, and then really the idea is to get the T-spine engaged with it as well, you know, and try to maintain this position. And that's just a little muscle contraction, you know, to kind of maintain a little bit of activity.
And the goal is to keep that hip from rotating too much, right?
Yeah. So typically what you get if you look from the side view is you get a lot of people when they come down, they sort of round this way.
Yeah.
Right? The whole idea is to maintain a neutral spine and a neutral position. Just go as deep as you can. So if this is it, then that's it, right? You're going to get a pretty good effect from that position as well.